Hello. Thank you for returning once again to learn a little bit more about how to govern a kingdom. You'll remember that when we left our friends, the royal family, they had just met with the cruel and ruthless general. And now the general and the king had a bargain. And at stake in the bargain was the fate of the kingdom. The only problem was that when the royal family joined the rest of the court in the dungeon, no one had any idea how the king could respond to the general's challenge, except for the prince. The prince knew from his own experience that the prime minister could always predict a choice like the one that was before the king at this time. So the prince looked for the prime minister, and as soon as he found him, he took him aside and they spoke in confidence. The prime minister knew immediately that this situation was very different from the one he had constructed and controlled earlier. But when he learned that the king could query the lieutenants, the prime minister knew he could help. Well, this time I can't just predict which meat the general will have for his midday meal tomorrow, but I can tell the king how he can get the answer he needs from the lieutenants. The lieutenants? Speaking to the lieutenants is useless. The king won't know which one is speaking or whether he speaks false or true. Oh, but with the right question, it doesn't matter. Well, this time it was the prince who heard the prime minister and was of a skeptical mind. It doesn't matter. How can that be? But the prime minister didn't even stop to answer the prince. He had much more important work to do. He went and found the king, and as soon as he found the king, the two of them spoke at length. And the next morning, right before the midday meal was to be served, the king was brought before the general. Well, have you determined which meat I'm going to have for the midday meal today? Not yet, my lord. I haven't spoken with your lieutenants yet. Oh, yes, my lieutenants. Well, the general was really ready for his meal, but he knew he was bound to grant the king one question, one answer, and then the prediction. So he gestured to his lieutenants, and both twins came and stood at attention before the general and the king. Go ahead, speak to whichever one you want. And the king turned to one of the lieutenants. If I were to ask your brother, the lieutenant, which meat the general will have for his midday meal today, what would your brother, the lieutenant, tell me? My brother, the lieutenant, would tell you that the general will have pork. In that case, it will be lamb. I'll have some mint jelly with mine and a red wine from my wine cellar, if you please. Well, the general truly savored the last fine meal that he would enjoy for quite a while. And when it was over, he removed the royal robes he was wearing. He put his general's uniform back on, and he mustered his army, and he led them far, far, far away, never, never, never to return again. And this allowed the kingdom to return to its former condition of peace and prosperity. And this time I'm happy to say that everyone did live happily ever after. The old king and the queen aged gracefully and prepared to turn the kingdom to their daughter and their son-in-law. The prince and the princess learned to rule wisely and well, and their children looked forward to inheriting a kingdom that was ever more peaceful and prosperous. The court, the entire kingdom, was content. And the prime minister? The prime minister continued to serve the royal house, and he always seemed to have another useful trick to share with them whenever it was needed. And that is how to govern a kingdom. Thank you.